Hey everyone, welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, we just ask you one teeny tiny little favor. Make sure to follow so I can keep on bringing amazing guests like the one I have on today. And this one's going to be a special one. Omni, for anyone that may not know you, tell us your elevator pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
John, I appreciate it. Excited to be on the show. You put out some great content for your audience. So hopefully we can do the same here. Yeah, Omni. I go by Omni, the Investor Guy. I'm here in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. Born and raised in Hawaii, though. So I'm an island boy and I've been away from the water for quite some time, but I'm a real estate investor, and my real estate investor journey started in Hawaii when I was there as well, about 20 years ago. Before the show, we were talking about doing a lot of things, right? And so I do a lot of things. I've done a lot of things in real estate investing. I would say I focus my efforts, although I have multiple businesses, they're all tied to real estate, or they're all tied to real estate investing and or real estate, and then just trying to grow the businesses. So the underlying goal of anything I do is growing my capital, growing my cash flow to buy more rental properties. So ultimately I buy as many rental properties as I can. I started out buying 1 a year, and then 2 a year, then 5 a year, and then 10 a year. And then we got up to about 46 properties last year that we purchased. And it's just, we're trying to stack as many as we can for that passive income. I do flip every once in a while. We wholesale every once in a while. I'm part of a real estate brokerage team as well. All of that is active income that flows through to purchase that passive income. And so that's kind of the quick summary of what I do. And then over the last few years, my real passion has turned alongside of that into education, just like yourself, right? Trying to add value to your community, people in your community, your friends, your family, your network. Not everyone is, how do I say it? So especially from a real estate or real estate investor standpoint, not everyone's at the same level, right? Everyone just needs a mentor. And even if you're just getting started, I tell my group that I kind of coach, I say, you can be a mentor as well. Like there's someone behind you that's just not as far along as you are. As long as you are willing to kind of give them some time and really give them some advice, you might help someone along the way as well. So excited to build a community of mentors and hopefully it's for the better and helps people achieve that financial freedom. So that's my elevator.
Nah, that's amazing. And as you probably already know, you only need to be 2 steps in front of somebody to help them out. But to take it a bunch of steps back, tell us about your walk to wealth. What was money like growing up? What was your relationship, growing up in the house? What was that like? Where does your journey begin?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really talk about that. But I'm from a big family, right? We grew up in the country in Hawaii. And amazing parents. I'm one of 8 kids. So we have a big family. So just being a big family in general is expensive. Being a big family in Hawaii is extremely expensive. And my parents had various levels of success, but by no means were we ever wealthy. We had my dad had his own construction companies and businesses, and he worked very, very hard. But there were absolutely years where we didn't have much, right? So I've kind of seen the spectrum growing up of, having to cut back and not having enough to be comfortable and thinking, hey, I wanted to figure out what can I do so I didn't have to have my kids worry about, or I didn't have to worry about where's the next meal coming from, or where we might lose our house because something happened in the business, right? So there's a lot of things that happen in life. And we probably went through all of that as a family, and we probably are stronger for it, but that kind of molded who I was. And so I knew from an early age, I wanted to control my destiny. I never wanted the ability to be laid off from a job. And so I'm unemployable. I cannot be an employee. I have to own my own businesses. And that's been the case for the last 20 years. And I've run multiple businesses and I still do. It just turns out real estate was the most amazing business. And so I started on the fix and flip side, if you will. And I actually was in Hawaii working at a surf shop, and I used to fix and flip surfboards. So we'd take in surfboards on consignment. The store would sometimes, and sometimes they turned one down and I would go buy it from the person trying to sell it. I'm like, I could fix this up and make a profit on that. And so it's acquiring an asset and adding value to that asset, then finding an end buyer. That's the process, right? And at some point found out that real estate was a much better asset and something that you can add much more value to. And I started to get obsessed with real estate, right? The Rich Dad, Poor Dad books just kind of changed my mindset and my life, and understanding that's the path I wanted to go. I just kind of spoke into existence and just started to talk to everyone about real estate. And that led to me finding my mentor and my mentors and giving me the opportunity to dive into and learn the real estate investing trade. Eventually got into the brokerage side as well and never looked back.
That's amazing. Another question I kind of want to ask you is, if you reflect a little bit, what was your life like in your 20s, right? Did you have everything all figured out? Is this where you seen yourself back when you were around my age? What was that like navigating the world? You have a bunch of siblings. Yes, you said you have a bunch of brothers and sisters, right? So, what was life like in your 20s at that point? Did you kind of have your head set on like, oh yeah, I'm getting into real estate, I'm going to do this? Or were you still just trying to figure it out? Like, what's the difference between you back then and you now?
Oh, there's a lot of difference there. But I got into real estate in my early 20s. So I would say I started young. I was 21-ish or so when I first started as a real estate investor. My mindset was completely different, right? So it was more about stacking up cash and making as much money as possible. And I got really good at making money. And then at some point I realized that wasn't what was most important. The active income did not matter as much. It helped, but I make more money, I spend more money, right? Whether it's a big commission or a big sell on a fix and flip, I found the way to spend it. And so the passive income or learning how to buy assets for that passive income took me a couple of years to really appreciate that and realize that that was my focus. But I would say I've always, in my 20s, my goal was to become financially free in my 20s. And I kind of put a plan together. I called my cash flow freedom equation. And just said, I knew I needed X amount of dollars every single month to be quote unquote financially free. And to do that, I needed X amount of rental properties or X amount of doors, X amount of passive income streams. And if I did 1 per year or 2 per year or 3 per year, I did the math and found a way to get there. And I started in Hawaii, but Hawaii is very expensive. And so I quickly realized I needed to go because I didn't have any money, right? So I didn't come from money. It was all about, how do I find something for as little money as possible? Can I put my sweat equity into it? Can I bring on a partner? Can I work with a mentor? Wholesale a deal. So I had enough money to put as a down payment, right? So whatever I could do, I did growing up, but it was still only enough to buy smaller, less affordable, less costly rental properties. And I turned to parts of the United States and I started to invest and learn how to be a remote investor. And that turned into the world of, you got to be really good at like interviewing and hiring a team because I still lived in Hawaii, right? So for me to have rental properties, I need to understand who is my team. You need your rock star real estate agents and your property managers and your contractors. And without being able to put systems in place to work with them and have those expectations understood and met, you can buy a great property in a great area that will do terrible if you just don't have the right team, right? So I got really good at finding the right team and maybe lucky in some cases as well. And that's kind of been my focus, is finding pockets to invest in, following principles on, is this an area that I want to invest in that I think is on the upward swing, but does cash flow as well. But most importantly, can I find the right team? So there's areas that I would love to invest in, but I don't because I just have not found the right team, right? And so it's starting with the team first. And then once you find that rock star team member or team members, then that gives you the confidence to buy a lot around that person or people.
Yeah. And I just wanted to ask you one more question before we really dive into real estate investing, fix and flipping, and all the jazz. What is the darkest point that you're most comfortable sharing in your journey? Right. And what was the first step? Because the show is called Walk 12, right? What was the first step you take to get yourself out of that hole? Like for a lot of my listeners, they're most likely just completely lost and don't know where to get started. But like, this journey has a lot of bumps, and a lot of the bumps usually are never ever advertised, right? It's always, fix a flip, get into real estate investing. And me and you both know it's a hard world out there in the investing side of the thing. But just in entrepreneurship in general, it's a hard world, right? So it's like the most darkest point that you found yourself on your journey that you were comfortable sharing. And what was that first step that you took to get out of that hole, to get yourself back on the right track and start finding success and start progressing, getting the snowball rolling a little bit?
Wow, I think I need a couch in here. I feel like this. Yeah, things we don't normally dig into. So my younger days, I was homeless, right? So that it was, and I don't like saying that because could I have gone home with my parents? Absolutely. So part of my stubbornness and want to be independent, but not having enough money to do so meant I lived in my car, right? And so that's rough, right? And that's rough when you're trying to build your identity and understand who your identity is and have confidence. And so definitely ups and downs like that lead to not just confidence issues, but like even like realistically succeeding, right? If you're working out of your car and living out of your car, it's very, very tough to actually, get ahead in life. And so figuring out how do you hustle and hustle harder than anyone else that is not at that same disadvantage as you is very important. And for me, is learning skill sets and am very achievement driven. So my self-worth, and I know there's an issue with this, but like I feel good when I achieve something, right? So people say, why do you want to buy these rental properties? We don't need any more rental properties, but I like it because that's a check on the box, right? That is an achievement for me. Why do I want to sell so much real estate? And sure, money, I don't really actually care about money, right? So money doesn't do anything for me. It really is the achievement. I love building things, and businesses are something that I feel I'm good at building. The moment I stop building, I get depressed almost. I feel like, man, I've quote unquote retired a few times from a few different things and just say, all right, maybe we're done. Maybe we're just going to live off our rental properties. And man, I can go into like a deep hole of like depression. I'm like, man, I'm not meant to not build. I'm not meant to not grow. So I've just, been okay with understanding I'm going to work for the rest of my life and I'm going to love it because that's what I love doing, right? I love building. I love working. I do my best I have 3 kids and be a good dad and be a good husband for them. But it's involved with what I'm doing. So they're in the investing business as well. So we created a business and they're part of that investing business. My wife is part of that as well. And that's kind of like our family activity because that's what I'm driven for. And now they're getting excited about that as well. So definitely making sure that I always have something to build toward is important for at least my mental sanity at the moment.
No, definitely. I love that you said that because I was on a pre-show call to hop on somebody else's podcast, and he had asked me a question. And one of the questions was, because I was trying to talk on how to find your purpose, because I've been reading a lot into Ikigai and getting clarity around my life about what I want to do and where I want to take this podcast and where I want to take my life. And he had asked me, so what would you say to the person who's like, for example, he used him as an example, like my sole purpose was to write this book. He wrote a book. He's an author. And so for like me, in my head, there's no actual answer to that question because I don't believe your purpose can be one action, one thing. It's like there's a overall mission and there's like an endless amount of ways that you could just continue to keep on serving that overall mission, that overall purpose. Is not just I was put here to write this book or sell this house or sell. I was put here. It's a never-ending thing. It's a continual thing. And the moment we stop, we're pretty much we might as well kick the bucket if we're going to stop at any point in time. And I love that you said that you got to keep on building. And when you're not in that state of building, you kind of get down because we're not complacent people. Even whether it's because we tie our self-worth to achievement or whether it's just for whatever the reason may be, but we can't stay still, right? We got to keep on going. And I want to actually not to get into the real estate side of things, right? Though you were homeless and you managed to get your way out of that. And you said you started with fix and flipping. Now, a lot of the time when people get into real estate, it's through wholesaling, right? Especially when you don't get into real estate without any capital. It's usually wholesaling, but you went the fix and flip route. I know you have experience flipping surfboards, but why fix and flip? Tell us about what was your decision-making process there and what advice do you have for people that are looking to get started in the fix and flipping space?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I did wholesale as well. And it's just the transition from adding value from something, a surfboard, to adding value, something just made sense to me. That business model made sense. I was already doing it. In terms of wholesaling early on and what I did in my first few transactions, it was with a mentor, right? I found a mentor. And so I found deals and found my way into equity of deals that I had no money to be involved in because I found those deals, right? So it wasn't technically wholesaling, it was partners partnering to be able to get into that and then making money on that transaction, saving that up until I had enough to go do my own deal, right? So it was the hustle. I grew up, my dad owned a roofing company, construction company. Those were our summer jobs growing up. So I know how to work hard, right? So I said, hey, what are you doing? What are you ailing right now? And he's complaining about his contractor not showing up for this. I'm like, I'll be there tomorrow. I'll show up. I'll be there tomorrow. And I didn't even give him an option. I'm just going to help out, right? And I didn't ask him to hire me. I didn't ask him to be my mentor. I just said, I'm just going to be there, right? I want to solve your problem. And by doing that, I'm going to learn what you're going through. And at the end of the day, we started off and he trusted me enough to bring me into a few deals. And I was lucky enough to do that and just saved up my money. And that sometimes meant I was homeless along the way for a short stint, not having enough money to to live it up like some of my friends were, but was able to stack that money and then roll that into deals because I was really obsessed with buying those rental properties along the way. So whether you start out as wholesaling, whether you start out as fix and flip, whether you start out as buying rental properties or something else, it depends on where you are, depends on what your motivation is and what are you bringing to the table, right? So if you have a great job and a lot of money, then it might be easier for you and you can probably continue your great job and be a partner, a financial partner where someone else is doing all the work or putting money down and hiring a team to do that. If you don't have the money like I didn't, then you got to bring the hustle, right? You commit your time or you got to bring the deal, right? Without one of those, there's no place for you in a deal, right? Someone brings the deal, someone brings the money, and someone brings the experience, the know-how, the management, right? So those are the three roles in every single deal out there. Sometimes you can play all three. Like right now, I usually play all three because I have the money, I have the experience, and I usually can find those deals. Starting out, you got to figure out I can only bring one of those. I have no money, but I have time. So I'm going to learn how to find deals. And although I wasn't trying to sell them or wholesale them, I didn't really even know what that meant at the time. I knew that if I brought this deal and I'm the only one with this deal, then there's value there. And I wanted to be a partner and at least learn through that process.
That's definitely an amazing thing to get started at. I was having a podcast with somebody else the other day, and he was like, if you don't know where to get started, become a acquisition specialist, right? And just start, or a bird dog. You just call it a fancier term, but like, you just start going out there and searching for deals, right? And that's essentially what a bird dog is someone who you just find the deals for people. But let me ask you, right? Because it takes a certain level of discernment to realize who's a good partner and who's not. And now with social media and everything, everyone's a top shot, right? So it's like, it's hard to find good people. So what advice would you give to anyone looking to get started, whether just in partnering in general for real estate investing, so they're not getting screwed over and they don't have someone that's going to take advantage of the fact that they're not.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is tough. I would say there's so much about what we're going through right now with social media that makes it easier because there's so many good resources. There's so many great mentors out there. There's so many great groups to be a part of. But the other side of that is exactly it. There are so many just pros out there that don't know what they're doing, that have never actually ever did it, right? The only thing they know how to do is say that they've done it, which is unfortunate. Ultimately, one of the reasons why the education event I run, people ask, why am I not doing it virtually? I only do it in person because I believe in that relationship still. And for me, it's hard for me to build a long-term lasting relationship virtually. There's value in there. You can get value absolutely virtually. You can build some level of relationship, but when you're talking about business transactions, like a lot of that still comfort level is face to face for so many people. Not to say it's a requirement, but that's what it is. So we build that in-person group. We get 100 investors in the room about once a month, and we like stare each other in the face and we just talk. Like there's education, but it's more mastermind than anything. Like, let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about this. And as you are sitting in these conversations, and you hear how people answer those, their answer may not be that relevant, but how they answered it may be relevant, right? You might understand who they are, and hopefully you understanding who they are might say, that's the one I want to partner with, or that's someone that I could partner with, or maybe no, good guy, but not the right philosophy for me. So I'm right? So I think being in as many of these groups that are not just superficial, but you get into like the deep mastermind discussions, and that helps you understand who you're doing partnerships with. So I create this mastermind for my personal growth level. I do everything that I can to be a part of high level masterminds throughout the US as well. So I travel, I fly back to Hawaii, I fly to Arizona, I fly to as many places as I can where these top level investors or top level business people or mindset people are. If they're willing to have me in their group, I'm in that group because I'm always trying to figure out how do I become better than I am right now. Right. So I look back to who I was 5 years ago and I'm embarrassed. Who I was 10 years ago, I'm like, man, I was an idiot, right? Who I was even a year ago. And all it means is, because if I would look back to who I was 10 years ago, I'm like, yeah, that was a good guy. Like maybe I didn't grow enough, right? So every year I'm trying to double who I am because I truly believe our level of success, no matter what we're doing, I happen to be doing it in business and real estate, but our level of success is really just proportionate to who we are, right? And we are who we are until someone shows us a different path or someone enlightens us of, we can become something different or become something more. And it usually takes outside forces or groups or people, for me at least, to understand internally what I should be changing or mindset shift moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. It's the idea of the mastermind, right? when two or more minds meet, it's something that's just bigger than just one person trying to think and reflect. And masterminds are something that's helped me a lot. And this podcast essentially is a little bit of a mastermind because I get to talk to so many smart people such as yourself. And like the beauty of it, it's you don't know what you don't know, right? And you get in front of some of these people that are really doing it big, and it's like, that's even possible? Like what? But it changes your perspective on things, and it allows you to grow into a person that you wouldn't have the opportunities to grow into because you didn't know that that even was possible. Right? There's people that I've had in my, so I'm also a licensed realtor as well, but I'm not really focusing on that as much anymore. But in my office one day there, I was on a call and a couple people went to a wealth building mastermind. They said in order to attend the mastermind, you have to have a $50 million net worth plan. So you don't have to have the 50 million net worth, but you have to have a plan to get there. I was like, there's a plan to get there? Like, sheesh, you guys are thinking big. Cause I have some pretty big goals, but it's like, it wasn't until they came back and they started talking about that they shared. I kind of wanted to ask you, right? But starting off, usually the high level mastermind, obviously, sometimes they're way too pricey and sometimes the local meetups might be very far. You started your own. You got that to 100 people in person, which is a very big feat. We were talking about this before we hit record. What was it like starting your own investor meetup, right? If you can't go to the places where people are gathering, what advice would you give to someone so they can kind of start their own thing?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And there's so many great events out there that I benefited from and want to take as much from each of those and figure out locally because they weren't local. Like like I said, I fly back to Hawaii a couple times a year. I fly to other places and I feel blessed that I can do that. But I know that there's like friends, family, like agents that I work with, clients, and just our community that would benefit from that. They just don't have that opportunity. Right. And so started out small and just really like within our real estate office as well, like just agents like, hey, you guys need to learn how to personally invest because you're making money as a real estate agent and you're successful. But at some point, like what's the retirement? There is no retirement plan. Right. And so you have the biggest advantage in terms of understanding real estate if you want to become a real estate investor. And so I gave them that knowledge and the threshold, the minimum requirement to be a part of that group. I called it the Breakfast Club, the Cash Flow Breakfast Club. Minimum requirement is they need to be committed to be financially free from 5 years from that time. Right. And so same thing. It's a plan. They didn't know what the plan was. I was going to help them with the plan, but you needed to be committed no matter what it took to become financially free. We're going to put a plan in place of you buying enough properties, which meant that you might need to like scale up your real estate business to go make some more money so that you can go buy some more properties. But it wasn't just sit in the room and learn. Right. So I think the reason our group has grown to what it is right now, because there's other meetups that are great, but I attend them. There's 10 people that show up. There's 5 people that show up. There's 15 people that show up, and there's inconsistency where we put our group out and within a few hours, sometimes it's at max capacity. We have to turn people away. We have waiting lists of people that want to get in. And because we have exclusivity, we have this expectation of people in the room. And it's if you're showing up here, you're part of a group and we all understand collectively, our goal is to become financially free. And it's beyond that. So our goal is not really just financial freedom. So I use the analogy, actually, we have a meetup tonight we're going to be doing. And so I get into Star Wars all the time. I get into like superhero stuff all the time. So, but the Spider-Man quote, with great power
comes great responsibility.
Right? Mm-hmm. Uncle Ben. So that's really what it is, right? So if you have great power, we got to figure out what is your great power. We don't know what it is. Is it you as a real estate investor? Maybe, maybe not, right? So, but figuring out what your great power is, I believe every one of us has a great power to do something. And then you have a great responsibility to use that power for something good, right? So I'm famous for saying like everyone in this room is meant to change the world. Like if I was teaching a high school class as a guest presenter just a few weeks ago, and I said that to them, everyone in this room is meant to change the world. So just think about it. Look at the person next to you. Look at you. What are you meant to change the world? We don't know what it is and we don't know how big it is. It's change the world for your family, maybe your community, or maybe just like you're going to change the world. But I always ask the question, knowing that you're meant to change the world and 10 years from now, we have a discussion and we decide you didn't change the world. What would be the reason? What was the excuse as why you could not change the world? And it always comes back to, I didn't have the money. I didn't have the resources, or I didn't have the time. Right. And so you kind of put those together and say, one, I believe we're all meant to change the world, and it may not be in real estate, but real estate is probably the easiest vehicle to help you become financially free. so that you can have the time to focus on changing the world, right? If you are meant to be the best artist, the best basketball player, the best business person that open up the next Amazon, whatever it is, you probably need the time to figure that out. And you probably need to make sure that you have the financial wherewithal to focus on that, right? And so although many of the people in our group are obsessed with real estate and love real estate, we have a lot of people in the room, they could care less. They don't love real estate, but they understand that if they understood real estate and they bought enough properties, they would be financially free. And then that gives them the space to go do something that they're passionate about that just might take it to the next level.
Yeah, and so you're creating something much more than a place for people to meet up. You're creating a movement, right? It's bigger than just a couple houses. It's bigger than mailbox money. It's bigger than just fixing the house, putting a nice roof on it, slapping some paint, and then putting it on the market, right? It's so much bigger than that. And so let me ask you then, how do you turn the group that you're creating, right, into a movement, right? Because as you said, even with my RIA, right, they have a local RIA that's over in like more north in Connecticut, or they'll get over 100 people in a room easy. But like the one where I'm at, which is a lot further, so I go to the local one. I just so happen to be in my hometown. We barely get like 30 people, right? And sometimes it's less, sometimes it's a little bit more, right? Sometimes it's new people. So it's like, how do you create something that people, like they're just raving fans, right? They just want to get into, they want to be there, they want to support, they want to be a part of the movement, not just something that, hey, I got some time this evening, I'll drive by.
Yeah, I will say it is tough. You need the right leader. You need the right person willing to put in the work. It's work to get the message out. It's work to build a team to get that message out and to feel that event from day one, right? Because if you have one bad week and people show up that week, those people are probably not showing up again. Like, man, there's only 10 people here. I'm not showing up to this. It's not worth my time. And it's just making sure that you are very vocal about how different this group is and what your expectations are and what everyone should be getting out of this, right? There's no sales in this group. So it's not like the goal is come here and find a partner. Goal is come here and be a partner for someone. Come here, bring a deal to the group, buy a deal from the group. So we want to encourage actually doing deals. And every single time we meet, I say, if you're here just to learn, you're not going to be welcome back. Like you're making a commitment to go do real estate, right? On your own terms. But we want you to use this knowledge to become financially free. That's your obligation, because I want you to become the next person that might lead one of these groups in your neighborhood so that you can get your friends and your family to the next level as well. So we kind of hold them mentally to that accountability. And it's a lot for some people. We have some people come that like, man, that's a lot. I just want to learn, and they don't come back. Right. And that's fine. Those are not the people that we want. We want the ones that need the knowledge, but need the team and the culture as well. And if you are always just like beating that mantra, you'll attract the right people. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, definitely. And so right now we kind of talked a little bit about your journey so far. We talked about starting a group now in the real estate investing side of things, right? What are the most common pitfalls that most people don't talk about that you hear, whether it's fix and flipping or whether it's, wholesaling or buying rental properties? What are some of like the most uncommon things that people fail with that aren't really mentioned too often? Because we know it's hard, right? We know it's going to take a lot of time, right? But what are some of the uncommon things that people normally don't plan for that kind of hits them unexpectedly when getting into real estate investing?
Yeah. So if you are in the value add space, and most of what I do is value add. So which means almost everything needs a renovation. Rarely am I buying a renovated property. So you're adding value, and there's a strategy as to why you're doing that. You need to understand the markets. You need to understand not just the team and the contractors, but the municipality, that city and county, the permitting process. And if I ever had any big mistakes or holdups, it was usually related to delays because of permits and not understanding the inspection process in the city versus the county before you move forward, right? Because that could be a 2 or 3 month mistake, and 2 or 3 months of delays, that's thousands of dollars, right? That cuts your margins down drastically just for waiting. And time is money, especially when you're on the fix and flip side. When you're on the rental property side, typically and one of the reasons why I like rental properties, buy and hold more, is I focus on multifamily. And often I'm buying a property that has, let's say it's a 4-unit, 2 of them are rented out already. So the renovations that we're doing are on 1 or 2 units, and we still have cash flow coming in, maybe enough to break even. And our profit comes once we get those units online. But rarely are you sitting with a vacant property completely, just hemorrhaging money along the way. You could still run into those same delays, but hopefully you have at least 1 or 2 renters that are paying to cover your your carrying costs until you overcome those delays. So that's probably the bane of my existence, is understanding and making sure your contractors understand, because you might have a great contractor and you bring them in across state lines and they just are unfamiliar, right? They do great work, but they're unfamiliar with that process, and that can definitely hold you up.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. And let me ask you, right? Because you mentioned too, you were in the wholesaling and you got into fix and flipping, and then you realized like, hey, this is great money, but I know if I stop one day and I want to go out, this is not going to be feeding me, right? Because as I said, fix and flipping is more so on a job, right? You might as well consider that a job more so than investing. But then you realize at some point that's like, hey, I need something coming in, even if I'm not putting in work actively, right? Of course, it's going to take a little bit of work, but like once it's set, it's kind of just flowing, right? At what point did you get to that point, and how did you start, right? Because you already have some real estate experience. How do you start? And what if people want to just go the route where they just go to rental properties from day one? What advice would you kind of give there?
Yeah, if I could encourage anyone, I would say focus on rental properties. Not to say there's no place for fix and flip, but you're exactly right. It is a job. It's a great job. It's a fun job. And every once in a while, we still do a handful a year. There's kind of a creative outlet of it, right? And from someone that was young growing up, it was hard for me to understand that, because you have a really good fix and flip project, or as a realtor, you have a good commission. Let's say you make 20, 30, 40 grand on this one deal, right? This one project, this one deal, that's a lot. And you're comparing it with a rental property that you might make $500 profit, right? A month. And you're like, man, that's not fun at all. I don't understand that. But it's understanding the passive income versus active income. There's a term that I like. It's called horizontal income versus vertical. I'm part of a group called GoBundance, and that's a term that they use all the time. And so horizontal, it's going this way, and your vertical is upwards. But if you think vertical, anything you go vertical, it always comes back down, right? Gravity brings it back down. And so that's your active effort. What am I doing with my time right now? My vertical income is based on my effort of pushing something up that hill or lifting a rock over my head or whatever it may be. But at some point I get tired for the day, for the week, for the month, for life. I put it back down and I stop earning that money, right? The horizontal is, let's say, roll a rock and just keeps going, right? And that symbolizes this passive income. The problem is that passive income is rarely enough to match that vertical income, right? That $50,000 commission or $50,000 profit on a fix and flip versus a $500 a month profit on a rental. You just got to understand, you just got to stack them. So it's stacking passive income is probably the best term you could understand. So don't get discouraged because 2 of those is 1,000, 3 of those is 1,500. And then soon you're up to 5, 10, 15, 20 grand a month passively. And then you understand, if it's truly passive income probably has 10 times the value of active income. Like a dollar passively is not the same as a dollar actively, because actively I had to put in my time and effort for that. Passively I didn't. And I can stack as many of those as possible. So I say, think of it as 10 times the value. So $1,000 a month is like $10,000 a month actively. And then because you still have the time to go build another business, buy another property, or whatever you want to do, stack it, walk away from it, as long as you have the right team or right systems in place, and now go focus on your next thing that you want to build.
Yeah. One of the points that I'm curious about, just because at this point in time, like I've been hearing a lot about GoBundance, right? I interviewed a guy literally 2 days ago who I've known from Keller Williams. He's in New Hampshire, and me and him were having a conversation. He's also a real estate investor and does like syndications. So like for a while I wanted to reach out, and then we finally got the time to actually schedule an interview. And me and him were talking, and he does a lot of giving back, a lot of charity work, a lot of helping out. And he was talking about GoBundance as well. And I've been on the internet recently, and I've just been seeing a lot of stuff tied back to GoBundance, and I haven't had the time to look into it. So like out of curiosity, what is GoBundance? I know they have a great like mission. It's about, living abundantly and giving back and stuff like that. But what exactly is GoBundance?
Yeah, GoBundance is a great group. It's been around for a while. I think Bigger Pockets, Brandon Turner, and David Green probably blew it up because they talked about it a lot on that show. And so a lot of people in real estate space decided to join it. But it's a group of people that just want to think differently, that want to have like-minded conversations. And it is around wealth. It is around understanding the value of wealth. So there's a wealth requirement. I think everyone needs to be at least a millionaire net worth or higher, something along those lines. And what that allows you to do is be in a safe space with other brothers in this common group. And there's pillars, and it's wealth building. It's understanding what we just talked about. The horizontal income is way more important than the vertical income. The passive income, way more important than the active income. And so how do we encourage people to do more? And how do we slowly get our horizontal income to eclipse our active income so that you're financially free, or you're financially free 2 or 3 times to the power? And then now you're there. What can you do? What good can you do? Right? Can you be a better husband? Can you be a better father? Can you be a better community leader? And one of the pillars is genuine contribution, right? And so it is holding us accountable to be good stewards in the community and give back, right? Whether it's charities or like what we're trying to do, provide value and education to hopefully change lives out there. And so there's weekly accountability calls. There's small, like 2, 3, 4, 5-person groups that meet up regularly, which I consider them brothers now. There's local groups as well. And then on a national level, several times a year, we go have vacations together and we're going to go to Tahoe in about a month and ski together. So we get to do some fun, adventurous stuff as well. But it's like a really cool exclusive club, and they mix in masterminds, they mix in education, they mix in some like no BS accountability. They'll call you out. If you're like surface level trying to pretend, they'll spot it, right? Because everyone in that room is at a high level. Everyone in that room is financially free or close to that and has businesses. So you get to have different conversations that you might have than you might have with your regular friends.
Yeah, and I love the point that you just mentioned about conversations, because a lot of these conversations aren't being had, especially when you grow up in humble beginnings. It's like money is like, can't talk about that. Don't want to talk about that. It's always something touchy when money is tight. And that really like paralyzes us, not really paralyzes, but it's like it holds us back. It cripples us a little bit and stunts our growth, because it's like the thing that we are all in search of and trying to get more of, right? It's the same thing that we can't talk about and we can't think about. And it's like that ends up not serving us at all whatsoever. And not until you have conversations like this with people that are, even if they're on the same level, but they have that same mindset. I just want to break free from this cycle, right? And it's just having these conversations that you really get in depth. And so I wanted to kind of ask you, right, with Go Abundance, you went from being homeless, whether you mentioned it was kind of an ego thing, but homeless nevertheless, right? A group filled with super high level people doing very big things and making a massive impact. Was that even like that idea even fathomable? Like when you were at that point where you were backload, like did you even think like $1 million net worth? Like what would advice do you give to the person that's just like never even seen like $1,000 in cash, right? Or $10,000 cash? Like, because $1 million is a number that some people will never even make in their entire lifetime, right? And to have that as a net worth, just like actively, it's like it's pretty big, especially when you're coming from humble beginnings. So, like, what kind of mindset shifts do you have to be to become a person that has money, time, everything, just abundance, right?
Yeah, I think if I had to go back to where I was, one, I didn't know what Go Abundance was or these groups were, and I don't know if I would have thought I would be in those groups, right? Because exactly the same thing. The discussion of money, the talk about money, even when I was making money, and we still didn't talk about it. We're private people, my wife and I, we just literally just put our head down, invested, and did our thing. And we didn't talk about it because that's how we grew up. We're taught not to talk about money, right? It's rude. It's almost evil to go after money. That was in my mind, at least. And so for 20 years, or not, maybe somewhere in the realm of 16, 17 years down the road, and I still haven't really helped many people in the real estate investing space. I found this level of success, and the occasional person that came to me and asked, I helped them, but I didn't post about it. I didn't tell most people I was an investor. And there's so many friends, family, people I grew up with that could have benefited along the way. So I have this guilt, right? And that's really what kind of got me to come out and be on more podcasts and share on more groups. And I published my book, The Castle Breakfast Club, earlier the year, solely for the purpose of I have this guilt of not sharing. And I feel like I need to share as much as possible, because it starts with one of these conversations, because there's no way I could have changed from who I was at 21 years old to who I am now at 41 years old in 1 year, right? That was year after year after year after year of drastic changes. I've reinvented myself so many times and I've grown so many times. And so it's got to start somewhere, right? So that mindset shift, I think, is whether or not it's the goal of getting in a group like that or being at a certain level, or it's just, I just got to be better at who I am. Like if I become a better person or more open-minded or whatever it is, understand the possibilities and understand that most limitations are really just in our head. If I can get to that level, then all right, let's see how far that takes me. And then you're going to get to a point and you're going to hit a plateau. And then you either hit that plateau in business and in life, and that's where you are the rest of your life, or you realize I got to become a different person. I got to figure out what group, what person, what conversations do I need to have to completely reinvent myself. So almost every 10 years is my goal to become a different person. My 20s were about financial freedom. My 30s was about generational wealth, and the businesses that I grew and the focuses I had were different than in my 20s. And now that I just hit 40, it's about legacy, like trying to figure out what's the meaning of all this, right? What do we want to be when we grow up? And what's the impact that we're leaving? Like, did anything I do really matter? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I would love for it to matter. And so now every decision I make is around, does this really matter? Like, does it really matter in the long run? If I die tomorrow, is someone better? Is the community better? My family better for this? So I'm having more of those thoughts and those decisions. My 21-year-old self didn't care about that, and neither should he have, right? And so I think who you are evolves and you will become a different person. And the quicker you become different people along the way, you should be able to dominate and achieve whatever you're working at different levels, and hopefully move on to the next thing.
And that's some super amazing advice, right? Why am I doing any of this? Does any of this matter? That's a question that really gets you to think and just sit there. It's like 100 years from now, am I one of the names in the books, or am I just another person that just kicked some rocks and lived the life and passed away after hopefully a long life? But, you know, who 100 years from now, what did the work that I do, like, did it provide a level of value? For example, like, for the most part, I think everyone knows Napoleon Hill in this space of self-improvement, self-development. It's like he is living beyond his life because he just provided so much value, so much impact in people's lives. It just continues to help people across the generations, right? Can we get to that level where it's like we're just impacting lives and sharing at such a high level? And you mentioned too that it took you a little while to get into sharing. For me, I kind of was like, hey, I know I'm not really anywhere right now in life. I just happen to be pretty good at social media. I happen to be good at talking, you know, and I know I wanted to help other people like me. I didn't know the most in the world, and I didn't, nor did I even start really, am I far from financially free, but I was like, I want to start this podcast in hopes that I could help someone that was in my shoes a year ago, 2 years ago. Right. And at the very least, it's just starting that now. And I didn't really have much to share. So what advice kind of would you give for people who think that as if they have not much, right? To start sharing, right? To start to find their voice, to start giving back, even if it's just maybe a motivational quote that they found on the internet. But like, what kind of advice you give to, you know, help us become more servant leaders, help us come from contribution, help us to always think about that grander purpose, even if it sounds a little grandiose or woo-woo or whatever it may be. Like, how can we kind of start even like just get into that thought process of thinking about those things? It's something that usually passes people like way over their head.
Yeah, that's great. And I would say if you're having that thought and that you're thinking through that, you're already in a growth mindset. You're already in hopefully an abundance mindset there, because you are trying to make an impact. You are trying to help people no matter where you are, right? Mm-hmm. And no matter what level you get to, you're always going to feel that way, right? Like you're going to get to a point and all right, you're a millionaire and you feel like, man, there's no way I should be talking to these people because they're 10 millionaires. And then you're a 10 millionaire. And then they're like, man, I'm in this room with these billionaires and I feel inadequate now. And so no matter what, it never stops, right? The reality is it never stops. And you mentioned this earlier. Are you 1 or 2 steps ahead of somebody? You have value, right? Like you have value to somebody. And if you've grown in the last year and you think about where you were a year ago or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, what motivated you? What helped you? Or what would have helped you, right? Is it those motivational quotes? Is it the right podcast? Is it the right YouTube channel? Whatever it is it the right mentor from not like the best business person or investor in the world, but a friend that you know that just happens to be right ahead of you? And if that's the case, then all right, that's who you got to be, right? That's who you got to be. Understand what helped you a year ago or 2 years ago, because who you are able to help is that person, right? You're not helping someone ahead of you. You're looking for, all right, who am I going to be next year and the year after that? And maybe you can find a model of someone that's actually in that space right now. And that might be who you're looking towards for advice, mentorship, or just following them to get inspiration. And the funny thing about mentors, I've passed almost every single mentor I've had in my life. Like I got to the point where I've exceeded them in terms of business and growth because they were comfortable where they are and that was fine. And still great friends. But all right, I need to figure out who my next inspiration, my next mentor is, right? If you are growth and you want to continue to grow, you will find multiple people to pull for inspiration. And you just may be one of those for someone along their path. So just get out there, and with social media and with these platforms that we have now, we have the ability to have a bigger voice. And as long as we're willing to talk and share and really be authentic and vulnerable in many cases, you'll resonate with people.
That's amazing advice. And you've been dropping amazing advice this entire conversation. And I know we're kind of supposed to talk about real estate, but something within me just, I don't know, it just pulled me to talk about something so much more deeper, so much bigger than just real estate alone. I don't know why I was getting that feeling, but where can we connect with you? Where could we find you at? I know you have big plans in store. So tell us about what you got working on and for the future with the Breakfast Club and everything you got going.
Yeah, I appreciate that. No, this is fun, and you're exactly right. Real estate's my passion, or the vehicle that leads me to my passion. But really, it's so much more than real estate, right? It is the freedom. And then what are you going to do with that freedom, and what's that impact that you can make? I'm on social media. I'm still figuring it out, but I'm Omni the Investor Guy in most channels. I have a website, omnitheinvestorguy.com. And specifically for the Cash Flow Breakfast Club, I was pushed to kind of think bigger at one of my last masterminds. And so rather than the few local meetups that we have, figuring out how to package this education that we have, package this unique format that we have, and make it available across the US. And so we are expanding to 100 locations over the next 3 years and partnering with other investors that want to start their own group and say, all right, you don't have to start from scratch. You can run your own Cash Flow Breakfast Club. Here's the content. Here's the video training. Here's the next steps, and help them promote it so that hopefully they could, one, build their own community that they benefit from, and more importantly, a community that will benefit from them and from the content as well. So that's at the website, cashflowbreakfastclub.com. Find locations near you or look to start up your own.
Amazing. And so now it's time for, I'm thinking of a new name, right? Because I used to ask 4 questions, but there's this 5th question that I've been asking people as of the last 2 podcast interviews I've done. So I'm still thinking of a name for it, but I'll ask you these questions nevertheless. It's how I finish every episode. Question number 1 is, what is the most impactful lesson that you've learned in life?
Yeah. And it depends on when you ask me this question, it would always be different, right? And because what was most impactful for me in my 20s or my 30s are different than what it is right now. So in the moment, understanding where I am and the legacy I want to build, I understand what I want to build is so much bigger than who I am and what I'm able to do on my own. And so I'm very good at just figuring it out and like rolling up my sleeves, and I'm not afraid of work, but that's to my detriment sometimes. And because there are so many people out there that do whatever I was trying to do better than I would, that might even have more fun doing it. And maybe I need to be a leader and hire them or bring them onto the team. So the book, Who Not How, over the last year has completely changed my life multiple times over, and understanding it's not how am I going to do something, right? I want to build this big business or this big development or whatever it is. It's who do I need to partner with? Who do I need to bring on the team? And so that who, not how is my mantra in life for everything right now, because I know I'm not the who. I'm not the right person for most jobs that I'm trying to do. And once I come to grips with that, it usually goes much.
And to add one more to that, who do I need to become, right? Do I need to be the guy that's working every day and on the roof and doing the constructing, or am I the visionary, right? Who do I need to become in order to get there, right? Or 2, what is the most admirable trait a person can have?
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. I don't know if I've ever asked that, but I like grit. Grit it doesn't mean you know everything. It just means that you don't give up, right? Because you ultimately have the grit to just keep going through. So if I think of like, what do I try to teach my kids? I try to give them skills. I want them to be honest. I want them to be respectful. I want them to be dynamic if possible. But more than anything, I want them to be someone comfortable failing and getting up and starting all over, right? So the grit to not give up at whatever you're doing is probably the most important trait that I could see.
Amazing. And so if you had to change someone's life with one book, you mentioned Who Not How right now, but if you had to change someone's life with one book, regardless of whatever place they were in life, what book would that be?
Yeah. So my default answer for people that are not in the real estate space, and if they've never read the book, is Rich Dad Poor Dad. And because that's a mindset shift for almost anyone, right, that has got into this space. So if you're not in the space, Rich Dad Poor Dad is just completely just changing your mindset. If you're already in the space, and there's so many books, my Brandon Turner has some really good books on multifamily investing that will completely change your life in understanding what you can do in that space. If I had to choose one, it's still Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah, amazing. And what is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind? You mentioned it a little bit throughout the episode already, but like if you had to like make it as clear and concise as possible, what is the legacy that Nye, the investor guy, wants to be remembered for 100, 200, maybe even 1,000 years down the road, right?
Man, that's a good question. First and foremost, I'm hoping my kids would think I was a great dad, right? Yeah, I'm hoping my wife thinks that I'm a great husband, great family man. Is probably first and foremost. Me trying to build all these things makes me happy. And I think if I'm happy, then I'm a better dad, I'm a better husband and things like that. But ultimately, we don't need me to go build those things, right? So that's what I really want. But in terms of like the community legacy, I really want to I want to be known as a guy that not just talked about helping people become financially free, but actually did help them become financially free. And I want to like the actual plan, the mentorship, helping them through transactions and getting there. So I actually have an actual goal of 10,000 people over the next 5 years. I would love to help 10,000 people to become financially free. And I came up with that number because we have 100 people at every one of our locations, and we're trying to open up 100 locations. And so that's 10,000 people. And if everyone's committed to be financially free, even though I'm not helping them individually, hopefully through the network, they're helping each other. And they have this commitment, holding each other accountable. Just think of the good that you could do. Think of the good that community could do if they truly were financially free and they want to tackle some big project together. They wanted to do something good, whatever was to them. So I think that the possibilities are endless of what might come from that. But I want to be, I don't know, the godfather of cash flow that help people to become financially free.
Amazing. And what is the first step that anyone can take that hasn't started a journey to start their walk to wealth today, right after listening to this podcast, that they can get up, turn their phone off, put it in their pocket, and they can start what's the first step?
Yeah. So depends on where they are, right? If they're just starting from scratch, then it's obviously, finding the plan. So the reason I wrote the book, The Cash Flow Breakfast Club, I'm not trying to plug this by any means, but
it's upside down.
Literally, it's my story, right? It's my story of what I did to become financially free. And step one that I followed was figuring out how to get rid of my housing expenses. So it's a house hack, right? But it's more of a life hack and a mind hack. And it's understanding how to control that and be disciplined for a period of time. So setting up a plan and just making sure that you know what step 1 and step 2 are. You don't need to know all 10 steps, but you dominate step 1 till you get to step 2. Then you dominate step 2 till you get to step 3. And it should be along the way of saving up money so that you have enough to invest. And so you can go buy properties, whether it's 1 property a year, whether it's 10 properties a year, or 1 every few years. Just be consistent, because most people get lost in those gaps, right? The gaps of I bought a property and maybe I'm going to buy one next year, and then I got distracted and I need to buy that new car, so I don't have the money anymore. So it's being disciplined and not having those gaps in between, and just saying, I'm going to put my head down for 5 years until I'm financially free, or 6 years or 7 years or whatever it is. After that, I'm going to look up, and then I'm going to figure out what's next. And then I'm going to figure out and move on to the next thing in life.
Amazing. And I had an amazing time just having this conversation with you, getting real deep into some of these more meaningful questions aside from just buying houses and getting a rental portfolio. So I genuinely enjoyed this conversation. I genuinely appreciate you hopping on the show and just giving and sharing all the advice that you did. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this grows. And hopefully someone decides to take up a breakfast club here in Connecticut, and I can attend that and take a selfie and send it over to you.
Love it. Yeah, sure. It was a pleasure. Thanks for the invite, John.